We've got Mike Kelly from NHL Network here as we roll on with our draft coverage from Nashville. Mike, great to see you. This is a super fun time because there are so many directions, and yet as we get set for the draft, there's always jockeying for, trades and, acquiring picks. And obviously Kevin Weeks has just broken some news that Kevin Hayes will, in fact, be going from Philadelphia to St. Louis. But at this point, it's for a Blues 2024 sixth rounder and likely another component. So it's kind of like sports and life. Sometimes it doesn't go as expected, right? Like Philadelphia and St. Louis wanted a bigger deal, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a bigger deal right now.
Right, because of Torrey Krug not waiving the no move. So, it's really interesting. And I think we should expect there to be movement ahead of the draft, ahead of round one tomorrow. I was on the red carpet last night talking to Barry Trotz. So this isn't, secret information, but he's like, we're trying to move up in the draft. It's difficult to do.
And then one of the other emerging rumors out there is the fact that Seattle, along with Montreal and Toronto, are maybe the front runners for Norris winner Erik Karlsson at this point in time. So that's just another layer to all this. Like, are we going to see? I mean, Hayes is a big money guy from a cap hit standpoint, but there are very few that are bigger than Erik Karlsson. So if that domino falls, I mean, these are shockwaves on draft night.
No question. And there's going to be I think, considerable salary retention in a Karlsson trade, right? 50%. It should be a lot. What teams could use them? Like, there's great fits there. Like,
Is Florida the best fit based on their injury situation coming into the fall? If you don't have healthy Montour and Ekblad, like, is Karlsson not the most logical? Like,
Karlsson's not so much of a rental.
No, I know, but
it
buys you time in a market where you have just reestablished, they hope, some real hockey obsession based on going to the Stanley Cup final, but not only going there on a way that earned tremendous respect from across the hockey world.
It also depends on the return, right?
Yeah,
so you took Kevin Hayes, and I mean, maybe you can speak more to that, Mike, but I think Kevin Hayes still can be a productive player, but at $7.1 million, that's very expensive for a 45 to 50-point player.
Yeah. But when you're getting it at half the price, which is what it looks like.
3.9 maybe, so there's some salary retention, and you're only giving up a sixth-round pick for. But like Kevin Hayes, do you think he can still perform and play at a high level? And then also Erik Karlsson. Was this year Erik Karlsson like, this is a one-off, it's never going to happen again? Or did you see trend with Karlsson that it may continue for 2 or 3 seasons?
I think more that, yes.
Okay.
And it was the highest point total by a defenseman at his age ever, right? Yeah. So it's an anomaly. It's an anomaly given his past few seasons. But we had him on the NHL Network a couple times as a guest, and we'd talk about, what happened? Where'd this come from? Yeah. Health was a big thing, and I think there's a mental component as well, where you go through COVID, and he's had some things that he's gone through in recent years, and he was able to get back home to Sweden, I think, for the first time since COVID last offseason, and see family and friends, and I think he's just in a better place. And you know how much of the game is a mental side of the game and the human element of it as well. Physically, he was in great shape finally, as much as he can be. So I watched a lot of Sharks games this year, and he controlled the tempo of the game in a way that no one else does, really. And that's peak Erik Karlsson. That's what he was doing back in Ottawa. 4 years from now, like, how much can he continue to do this going forward at his age? I don't see any reason next season why it shouldn't be. I had a great debate with somebody who I have a lot of respect for in hockey as well, where I said, part of the reason why he had so many points and did all this is because he was on a bad team, and he kind of had to be their offensive guy for them. If he's on Boston, he probably doesn't have that many points because he doesn't have to be that guy. And
but is he still 75, 80 point guy?
For sure.
Probably.
Point a game, no question.
Pretty amazing,
which is amazing. So if you're a contending team looking to get him, I don't think the fair benchmark would be what he did this year. It's elite, control the game when you're on the ice, like puck possession monster. And he's better defensively than I think he gets credit for.
So as a Sabres market, we don't want Montreal to get him because the next 2-3 years.
What about Ottawa? Is that love affair seems to still linger?
I'm like, we don't want him in a team that the Sabres will compete with, because despite the fact that defensively he can make some mistakes, his offensive upside and his play controlling upside is way more than all the deficiencies.
He's a plus player for sure. Okay. And even on San Jose, which they were terrible last year, goals for percentage at 5-on-5 above 50%, expected goals above 50%. everyone else on the team, when he wasn't on the ice, all of that was like this, right? So, like, let alone the actual metrics that we look at of his real contributions, he'll be fine.
I mean, we've had a nice build-up. It feels like Marty and I here in the first hour just, trying to ramp up the excitement as far as this year's draft class, and especially when it does seem like such a wide net as far as players available for the Sabres. But we're most curious with you joining us here, like, how has your view of kind of scouting and or ranking, prospects changed and grown with all the information available? And what are some of the determining factors you really, really hone in on? I'm going to give the audience a little sneak peek here. You've got Oliver Moore up on your screen right now. So
I do. He's talking about.
He's a guy that obviously has fallen into the potential for Buffalo based around speed. But Marty and I were just having this discussion. Okay, well, how do you actually compartmentalize and quantify speed? Like, how does he use it, and where does he use it, and where does it become most beneficial? Like, take us through this evolution of scouting as we approach night one of the draft.
Yeah, it is an evolution, and I was telling you guys in the commercial, we had our company hosted an analytics meetup last night, so a lot of team analytics people there, and
they're only there for the free food, or they're there for the numbers?
The free food went quick.
Okay, good.
It did. And
free food helps the numbers on the bottom line.
That's
like it doesn't.
We had a good turnout.
Yeah.
In this industry, free food and beer, you're going to get people.
You're gonna
right?
get people.
It doesn't matter. So, but it was really good. And I think sometimes, at least in the media sense, you get, this is an analytics team. This is an analytics team, and there's a few. Like, it really is used a lot, especially at this time of year, by almost every team. Yeah. And they're very capable at this point as well. So. There's a lot that goes into it. The one thing that I would impress, I guess, is and look, I work for the company, right? The Sportlogiq. I'm a big believer in what we do, obviously. There's no one answer. This is great information. It's tremendous information that goes into the decision-making process. It's nothing to say, like, fire all your scouts because we got this now, or vice versa. You need both, and both are tremendously valuable. So for us, it's helpful, I would say, as a benchmark of, if let's say you're the director of amateur scouting and you're like, we've got this guy 25th, and I come to you and I say, we've got this guy 8th. Well, let's figure out the difference together and fill in as many gaps as we can together, and that's what people are doing.
How
can you give us a little?
First of all, Duffer, you said remember to ask this. So I talk about the Sabres, and Kevin Adams and Jerry Fortin have been talking about hockey IQ and speed. Now, is there metrics that you can look at when you look at analytics that will give you an indication of hockey IQ and speed, or is it more you got to watch the game because high danger chances, how do you score above your expectations or less, and systematic play may be more data driven, but hockey IQ and speed, is that data driven as well?
To a point, yes. It doesn't replace the being in the rink and watching everything unfold. But absolutely there's that component to it where we have inputs that we'll put into a model to quantify hockey sense the best that we can.
Okay.
And there's value in that. Does this player make the right play on an entry or the highest probability play on an entry or a pass or a shot? Those are all things that would go into the way that you think the game, right, more or less. So we can do that to a point. And you can take that and say, okay, this is what we've got. Like, I've literally got hockey sense as a thing here that we're looking at. But again, it requires the human element as well of okay, well, what team do they play for? Who does he play with? What are they trying to do in terms of their system that they play to fill it all in and ultimately get the most holistic view that you can.
What does Oliver Moore present in your eyes when you look at his chart that's in front of you right now? Like, what are the standout things, and then maybe we can go into a few others that might be in the Sabres realm, but just as people want to understand what you're looking at and evaluating a player, what do you see there?
Yeah, the skating is the thing that jumps off the charts, right? And you watch him and you see that as well, but the same with what we value. I think if he's there for Buffalo at 13, that would be a really interesting pick. I don't know that he will be there, but if he is, absolutely somebody to consider. Guy who knows how to get to the right areas of the ice and has a good shot. He's a great player. We saw what he did with the U.S. team and his line mates and everything. And if he's there at 13, it's like, again, I don't want to call him undersized. Like he's a little less than 6. He's
but taller than Bedard.
That's the thing. Bedard is like, we're going to start picking apart every other guy that's not 6 feet tall.
Haven't we always? Yeah. Honestly, I can't get the picking apart of John Tavares from with over 15 years ago. I mean, even though he was an exceptional talent, by the time John got drafted, it was like, could we stop picking apart this young man? Like, I felt bad for him. And guess what? All he's done is been a point-a-game guy over the course of his career. Like, he was going to figure it out. And the hockey IQ guys always figure it out, even if their shot isn't elite or their skating isn't elite. The hockey IQ changes the dynamic and elevates these guys.
And again, these are kids, right? They've got a long ways to go. I think, conversations I've had with people in hockey, the work that I've done, I think you can improve hockey sense to a point where you can improve a shot or even skating technique probably more.
Of course.
Right? So would you value hockey sense in a young player maybe more than things that you think developmentally we can absolutely get this guy farther along? Probably. It's a good thing to look at. I wonder, like, Nate Danielson's a guy I really like. I wonder if he'll be available at 13 for Buffalo. Kind of an Elias Lindholm-y type, complete player. Whoever the Sabres get at 13, they're getting a good player. Like, however it shakes down, it's going to depend on who's around.
But do you think they should keep it, or should they trade right now and try to enhance the current roster based on the fact that almost everyone seems like they should be in the market for a top 4D? So if you're thinking that, then trading the 13 would seemingly get you that top 4D.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting for Buffalo, right? Because a few years ago, it's like, we got to build this thing up.
Yep.
But then you start getting a little frisky with like, oh, we were close last year to getting in. We really like the progression of our young guys. Do we start kind of going for it now? And there's been teams that have kind of expedited the process because they've just gotten there quicker than they thought they would. Trading 13, like outright, he's gone for a roster player. I don't know if I'd go that route. I still think you're getting a really good player at 13. I still think Buffalo's like building towards bigger and better, consistent, perennial playoff team and also eventually cup contender.
But that's the debate again, is how do you compare the numbers that you get through Sportlogiq and really digging into the numbers and say, this is an NHL player and there is the data that we're getting that we are going to study, and the prospect and their data. How do you compare those two and put them on the same platform to be able to evaluate? Are they different just because of maybe you don't get as much available numbers at the junior rank or in the European ranks? Or do you get the same things, the same type of reports for both prospect and NHL players?
Yeah, us now, we have more data from more leagues and more complete data than we've ever had. We have full CHL, USHL. We've got more than we've ever had. So in terms of comparing guys at their same ages, it's very useful, helpful. In terms of projecting.
Is that what you do? Like if you look at a prospect, Adam Fantilli, let's say, and you say, okay, well, let's compare him to player X at the same age that is now a bona fide superstar in the NHL. Do you do that and go back in years and see how to compare them at the same age?
That's a great exercise, and it's something that now that we've had several years of complete data, we're able to do more completely than we ever have. And that's the way to do it. It's not to say, hey, this guy's junior stats look a lot like Braden Point's NHL stats.
Okay.
That's not apples to apples, but what was Braden Point doing? And that's exactly it, right?
And so Rasmus Dahlin in a few years will be like compared to what did Rasmus Dahlin do in his draft year compared to a potential first overall defenseman, and then they'll use that to be able to compare a little bit of the two.
One way to do it, yeah. And the other way is to evaluate and account for leagues. So you could mention a guy like Adam Fantilli.
Yep.
You could mention Oliver Moore, who played, U.S. You could mention, Dvorsky, whatever. You can kind of look at scoring rates, which is a pretty surface level thing at least, and account for league strength and try to make it as apples to apples as you can. It's, again, an inexact science here, but there's a lot of ways to try to account for these things, to try to benchmark, okay, these players are coming from different places, different quality of competition, teammates, etc. How can we try to level that as much as we can? Also, again, like you said, what were NHL guys with similar profiles at that age? What are they doing now? And Is that a way to look at it?
This is really interesting because now you're talking about league strengths and all of that. And today is One Word Tuesday here on Sabres Live. So I've actually petitioned the Sabres brass to draft more players from the Q because I said the best players are from the Quebec League. But if I was to tell you the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, for example, what's the one word that would come up when it comes to something that stands out about that league?
Offense.
Offense.
Okay.
Hey!
What about the OHL?
God, top of my head.
See?
I don't know.
The OHL's hard
Too
for
many
me.
things. The OHL's hard.
Yeah, I don't know that there's
Probably
that
the
one
more
thing.
rounded thing.
Yeah.
And what's Western?
What's the WHL?
Farm boys.
Farm boys, like big, strong defensemen. Okay.
Intangibles.
Well, I'm going to say, like, for example, what about the players that are playing NCAA? What is the one word that you would say about that league?
I mean, it's gotten a heck of a lot better
I'll
over
go
recent
with
years,
growth.
that's for sure.
Growth,
Yeah.
Because
maturity,
it's a right,
mature
exactly.
league.
Yeah.
Like Matthew Wood at Connecticut was the youngest player in the NCAA this year. How do you look at the numbers and compare him to other players in the NCAA when he is the youngest player playing against 23, 24-year-olds there? Like, is that an exercise that's hard to do?
It's necessary, and like I don't mean to like not give answers. You talk about these leagues, I just don't really like you can. We all know about the Q, right, and what it kind of is.
I love that you said offense. The Q has got offense,
Right. But we
So you
shouldn't
look at-
generalize. I think that's the whole
And you also
point.
could look at goaltenders. No, maybe it's past that, but you can also look at goaltenders in that way.
Sure. Hey, if you're an agent for a goalie in the Q, you say, hey, it's a high-scoring league. My guy's really good.
Yeah, exactly.
But players are different, and there's players that are elite offensive players in other leagues or whatever. I don't.
Yeah.
That's why. But I understand your point. Age is a consideration. I mean, there's a player this year who has been through the draft once already, who will likely be somewhat of a high pick, and we factor in the fact that he is a year older.
Okay.
So while he might have very impressive metrics in a lot of areas, you do consider the fact that he's got a year on some other guys, and all those things that go into the equation of essentially trying to make this as apples to apples as you can, even though it isn't, to just get an objective view of what the player kind of is now, where you think it can translate. But that's the fun part, talking to scouts as well, and people in hockey that don't come from this background, is getting their viewpoint on what translates and what doesn't. There are guys now that might have great kind of counting stats and metrics of puck possession, all these things that we know, wow, if you could do that in the NHL, you're a superstar. Maybe you have deficiencies in your game that aren't going to allow you to do that in the pro game. This is why it's a big puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Mike Kelly from NHL Network is with us, and Sportlogiq, of course. As we have our One Word Tuesday here, and we've asked people, what they, kind of the traits that they would like to see in the Sabres' first pick tomorrow at 13th overall. As you can imagine, there's still a large component, and especially after what we saw in the Stanley Cup final, a large component of fans that want to see physicality, truculence, toughness, whatever you name. So I ask you, among your analysis, is there growth in finding ways to quantify that? How do you view traits like that within numbers, and what do you see?
Well, height and weight would be a starting
The basics, yeah.
The basics. I'm always careful with that, and I the sense that I've got kind of being down here and talking to people is I don't know that there's such an appetite for smaller guys because of what Vegas has done and because of what Florida had done, and it is a copycat league, and you could look at players like Zach Benson and Brandon Yeager. Those smaller guys, super skilled guys, like on talent alone, surefire top 10 picks. Like Benson in terms of talent could be a 5 or a 6, but is he going to go there because that perceived thing at least might work against him given the climate? It's a consideration, but like Ryan Leonard is kind of that guy who can be that big kind of physical, player that teams would be seeking right now. Maybe he goes a little higher than otherwise, but sure, puck battles. There's things we can quantify, like just engagement physically in different areas of the game that can give you a sense of a player. And look, I brought up Braden Point before. Like that's the one thing you could say. okay, there's a really talented player who's 5'10" and he's a center. How many 5'10" centers are in the NHL? There's not many. But there's exceptions to rules. Braden Point is consistently at the top of the league in terms of engaging and winning puck battles every year. He's not a big guy. So there's a skill as well. I try not to get too hung up on the whole size thing because we've just seen too many exceptions to the rule as well.
But like, if you could have quantified that, let's see when Matthew Tkachuk was drafted. Okay, he went 6th overall. I just pulled it up because I'm like, who was in front of him again? Obviously, Austin Matthews was number 1. There was no debate. He was going to be there. But they went Patrick Laine, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Jesse Puljujärvi, Olli Juolevi, and then Matthew Tkachuk.
That's a tough one for the
Vancouver Canucks with Olli Juolevi.
Yeah.
It's also a tough one with the Edmonton Oilers with Jesse Puljujärvi. I mean, can you imagine Connor McDavid, Matthew Tkachuk, Leon Draisaitl on that team? But was there a aspect of Matthew Tkachuk's game that could not be quantified through data that should have been able to, and probably put him in the top 3, right? And maybe 2nd overall when you redo the draft?
I'd have to go back and look at that specific example. I'm not sure. I mean, the thing with the Tkachuks,
Brady's the same thing, right?
So here's where I was wrong. I thought Brady went higher than I expected.
Okay.
Not by much, but he's turned out to be everything and more you could hope him to be, right?
Right.
Matthew's a more skilled player. They're both incredibly effective, great players, and bring similar elements in certain ways. But here's the thing with like Matthew. We saw what he just went through. His arms in a sling. I was talking to him last night. Like he couldn't dress himself and he's playing. How do you quantify that?
Right.
You can't. The guy has a cracked sternum and he's still playing.
Pain threshold.
Well, that's
1 to 10.
It's absurd. But like they come from Keith, and we know what Keith was as a player. So there's bloodlines there that you could probably be pretty sure these guys are going to be warriors, and that's what they've turned out to be. There's no perfect way to do it, and somebody who has a lot of experience in this field put it to me once. The only thing he's certain of is he's going to be wrong every year. And you're going to be right sometimes too. But that's what makes it fun for me is trying to get as far along as you can to make the best picks possible as often as possible, which still is not a lot.
Sabres pick 13th tomorrow, and then on day 2, right out of the blocks with picks 39 and 45. We'll see how it plays out. Mike, great to see you today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Mike Kelly from NHL Network and Sportlogiq.